need to make new trim and molding for my shop. I want to get that finished before winter, and one of the things that I need to do is chamfer or round the edges of the trim I'm making. But one of the projects I need to finish is building a router table. So normally, of course, I would just grab my router, I'd put a roundover bit in it, router table, run the molding through it, done and done. That would have eaten up a whole bunch of time. Like I would have needed to build a temporary garbage router table, which I have done before, just to run a few dozen feet of trim, and I'm just not interested. So instead, I spent 40 bucks on Amazon, and I'll provide a link in the description for this guy. So it's gonna make the job easier because it's a chamfer plane. Kind of got a kick out of that. So let's take a look at what we got here. So got the plane itself, and it came with a whack of other cutters. Now we've got everything from a 3/16 roundover bit here to your general purpose 45. We've got some shaped cutters as well, which I thought was kind of interesting. That's actually the reason that I bought this one specifically, is that it shows people, pretend I didn't just do that, is that it shows people making custom molding with this. So that's a little molding knife, like you'd find in an old school molding plane. And now here's where we get to kind of the meat and potatoes of this again, is, yeah, I probably could have banged together something in my shop that would do this same job. I have built Hawk Krenov planes. I've built chisels from scratch. I've made all kinds of shit from scratch. Certainly well within my capabilities, but my time is worth money. And given how long it would have taken me to build something like this and then, you know, then do the job, or build the router table and then do the job, it was worth spending the $40 to get this tool. So let's take a look at it here. So this is metal of some sort. It's obviously a casting. Looks like it's powder coated. I'm assuming this is aluminum. So what we've got here is a little set screw. Holds the blade firmly in place, and then an adjuster that moves the blade in and out. So you would set your depth of cut with your wheel here, lock the blade in place. That's obviously way too aggressive for any useful purpose. Lock the blade in place, and then ride this along the corner of your stock, and that blade is going to cut into whatever you're working. And it's either going to put a 45 on it, like it would with this blade, or a round over, like it would with one of the other blades. So that's the thing that I have to get to next. Now, issue being, it does appear as though you have to remove every one of these screws in order to take this thing apart and change the blade out. So rapid blade changes, no. Let's just take a boo here and see how long that takes us. Anywho, just want to take a quick look at these. Yeah. Okay, so right out of the gate, these aren't too bad, but there is a noticeable burr on this cutter on the inside face. That's not good. So we're going to have to jury-rig something together. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a round piece of dowling or something that matches that radius, and then with some wet dry sandpaper we're just going to draw this along that to remove that burr, and then dress this face on a diamond stone to take the last little bit of the burr off. All of these are going to need to be sharpened in order to work well. That's just the way it is. Like I still find it funny when I'm on forums and stuff like that, and people are complaining that the brand new tool they bought isn't like razor sharp out of the packaging. That's your job. Like, as the guy using the tool, you have to know how to sharpen it. Like, wasn't that long ago, that was just common practice. Like, you did not buy things pre-sharpened. You fully expected that when you got this thing, you were going to be the guy doing the sharpening. So let's root around here and see if we can find something that matches that radius. Now, what I'm trying to do here, I'm going to try and work over that very carefully. Let's just carefully move this stuff out of the way. Is I'm not necessarily trying to sharpen this, I'm just hoping to strop that burr off of there. So You could do this with a piece of leather and some polishing compound. And we're just going to keep checking our work to make sure that... Oh yeah. I don't think it's going to take much. It's a very minor burr. It's just a leftover from the manufacturing process. But I just want to make sure that it's stropped off of there. Well, you get the idea. So that's the gist of what sharpening this guy is going to look like. Cleaning that up so that it's a more effective cutter. I'm going to set that aside for a second just so I can go back to this guy here. So to switch that out, I'm going to remove that thumb screw. I'm going to save that wave washer. I'm going to reassemble it the way we took it apart. I'll chuck that in there. Careful to get that washer first and not buckle it. And there we go. So now we can stick this thing back together. We can tighten up all these screws. So I'll get to that in a second here. I just want to show you what I'm talking about with this one. So this actually isn't too bad. It's not as polished as the other one, but you can see that's not square. That cutter is not square to the face of the tool. As Mr. Machinist Square will help us verify. So I'm just going to quickly... This wipes off easy. I'm just doing this for visual clarity. So get a little bit more contrast. Now you can see that edge is not quite square. It's close. Was that about 9-10 thou? About the thickness of a high E string on a guitar. So I will probably end up putting this in a jig or using a jig to square this up. Just so when I'm using this tool and I'm expecting a 45-degree chamfer, I'm actually getting one. I'm not getting some random, cockeyed thing on there. So before I use this particular bit, I would have to do quite a bit of work to it. This one should be satisfactory for the trim that I'm working on. So we'll put this back together and we'll take it out to the shop and see how she goes. So always keep your offcuts. You're eventually going to need them to set up another tool. So let's see how this little fella works. So do I think this was worth the 40 bucks? I will let you know once the job is done, but kind of preliminary feelings on this are positive. I'm gonna obviously have some work to do sharpening these. It's gonna be a little bit tricky to set this up. I'm gonna see if I can find a better wave washer to put pressure on this adjustment screw. And I'm not fussy about this lock screw. It's too small and I don't feel like it's really doing much work. The other thing I might do is shim the inside of this thing with a little bit of UHMW tape, just so that cutter is perfectly centered and that set screw is pushing. It's not pushing this over too far. But like I say, all in all, I am pretty pleased with that. And if it saves me, setting up my router table, pulling out a roundover bit, all of that stuff, and I can just very quickly take the edge off of this stuff, paint it, tack it up, boom, done. I like that. So at this stage in the video, yes, I am pleased with that, and I think it was worth the 40 bucks. I think it is going to make the job easier. Typical complaints would be, fit and finish. This isn't a Veritas tool or something like that, so it's going to be a little bit rough and ready. You are going to have to do some sharpening yourself on these cutters, but you should expect to do that on any cutting tool you buy. And other than that, it's just a matter of dialing this in, experimenting with it and figuring out what I need to do to get it to do what I want it to do. So, rainy day in the shop today, you can probably hear that. Good day to stay inside and test out this tool. So, showed you the benchtop unboxing and the quick little test I did. So I came out here to the shop and actually started using the chamfer plane on some of this stock that I prepared to use as trim here in the shop. And we ran into a couple of snags. Now, one of these things was always going to be a problem, and that was tear out where the grain is changing direction. Like, ideally, you want to go with the grain with a tool like this. That's not always an option. And the other thing I'm running into is, if you can see that, if you press hard enough on something that you've already primed white, it leaves paint behind, which is obviously a pain, kind of defeats the purpose of priming it in the first place. So I'm gonna have to deal with that. Now, ideally, again, this would be made out of wood. There's a reason that I prefer things like this. This does not leave marks on anything. It leaves a beautiful smooth surface on everything I use it on. Never had an issue with it. So, eventually what I'm going to have to do with this is I'm going to pull it apart. Luckily it comes in half, and I'm going to sand and polish this down to the bare metal. Now if it's aluminum, it's probably still going to leave marks on my wood, but that'll be better than blue paint. So those are my impressions in use in the shop. We're still dealing with some backlash issues on this adjustment. This little adjustment knob here is too tiny, and the iron can still creep even with that sucked down tight. And there is a little bit of side-to-side play in the iron that needs to be shimmed out. So these are all things that are fairly easy to address. Overall, I'm still pretty pleased with the tool, especially at this price point. It just needs a little bit of tweaking. All right, so we're back indoors out of the rain. This was getting on my nerves. I couldn't leave well enough alone. So I grabbed my flat sanding block, which has got some old paper still stuck to it, which is good enough for this job. And gave this a couple of passes, and as we can see, the casting isn't exactly dead nut smooth either. So I'm just gonna give that a little bit of a cleanup on both sides. Okay, let's take a look here at what we got. Not to have to do too much around with this, but right, so I am going to add some UHMW tape to this thing. I'm going to start. I've already started. You guys missed the first bit. I'm going to degrease this as best I can. Just like that. Alright, so we're going to carefully place that down into the center of the V and push it into place. Okay, and once we've got that stuck down there, you can see I've done both sides. This blade is going to get trashed doing this, but that's fine. Start from the center. I'm going to follow that curve, just like that. And then we're going to very carefully trim along the top, just like that. All right, so that's those two inside surfaces dealt with. Now I can tell you already that there's a lot less friction there, and I can tell you already that if we take a piece of wood and we just rub that vigorously on there, we're not getting any paint transfer now. There's no paint transfer, and the aluminum isn't leaving any marks. So that's already a huge improvement. Now, this did cost, I can't remember, $10 or $12, but the thing is, I needed it for a different project. I didn't actually order it for this. So the fact that I can use it for this is fantastic, but, you know, it would be better if I hadn't had to. And so what we want to do is put some of this tape down in there. And there we go. So hopefully that takes care of the slop in the mechanism. So when this thing is put together and you tighten down the set screw, it pushes the blade too far over to the side. It's no longer centered in the channel, which kind of defeats the purpose of this quote-unquote precision jig in the first place, right? So that shim should be about the right thickness, and it is going to compress down as we tighten this set screw. So let's tighten this back up. Again, probably not the most entertaining part of this video for you. There. Yeah, see, that's a little bit more like it. That's the kind of shavings that I would have hoped to have got from it in the first place. And that's a nice, gentle round over. So, was that actually worth the $40? Was it actually worth the effort that I put into it? I think it saved me more than $40 worth of time. So for this particular job, I'm gonna say yes, it was worth the 40 bucks. Of course, now that I've got enough of the trim done that I can start building some cabinets, that's when I finally got everything put together, the UHMW tape put on it, everything's sharpened properly, and it's actually working really, really well. And that's how well I was hoping it would work when I took it out of the package. That was not the case. But given that normally in a circumstance like this, I would either have to build a router table or use one of my block planes and just eyeball that round over as best I could, which would lead to some problems when I'm trying to match it up when I'm joining pieces. I think this was worth it. It's probably not going to be the first tool that I reach for unless I have like very little to do. Like my workbench here, I've never eased the corners off on it. I just built it and started using it. Again, it was a surprise, surprise, running out of time kind of a thing. So this might be the kind of job where I'm like, okay, there we go. We've broke that sharp edge. Nobody's going to get a splinter. Nobody's going to cut themselves. In the future, if I have trim to make for a piece of furniture or to go inside of a house, then I'm going to spend the time building the router table. So hopefully that gives you enough information that you can make your own informed decision on whether or not this little profile plane, whatever you want to call it, is actually worth your time and money. So please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and it costs you absolutely nothing. And stay tuned, we're going to be doing more work out in the workshop here in the coming weeks and months. Hope to see you in the workshop again soon, and until next time, keep making cool stuff.